work locally with the most vulnerable people in our community, try to bring them back into service provision, local communities, try to bring them, work with them to get them back mainstream in society as a whole.
Activities for the over 60s will be gone. Social welfare and money advice gone. Plans to build a youth and community resource centre gone. Quality youth work gone. Community-based drugs rehabilitation gone.
So all of this talk about protecting the most vulnerable is nothing more than empty rhetoric.
We'll start with yourself first, Gerry. The community sector in Ireland, can you just give an idea of how big it is and what kind of roles are involved in the community sector?
Yeah, I mean, in brief, we would estimate that the community sector employs around 70,000 people who are direct employees in relation to the sector, and they deliver services to the most disadvantaged areas of community. For instance, you'd have delivery of services in relation to community training workshops, in relation to drugs task forces, and that type of essential service that's required within the communities, but which is not delivered by government centrally, and therefore the need to deliver it falls to the community sector. Right,
and the community branch then within SIPTU, I gather that's quite a new branch, only 2 years old. How did that come about to create the branch?
Well, I suppose the primary reason why it came about was out of necessity, because prior to the community sector branch being established, community sector employees who joined the trade union movement were placed in branches that weren't specifically identified with regard to community sector. So that would mean that, for instance, in general terms in the Dublin area, if you were employed in community sector and you joined SIPTU, you would be allocated to the state and related branch of SIPTU. And that led to a situation where you had a community sector worker in a section that really wasn't best placed to deal with the issues for that particular employee. So a decision was taken to establish a branch, and I suppose really the catalyst of that decision was in relation to the attempt to eliminate job initiative employees in 2004 on Mary Harney's report. And what we recognised at that time was that we didn't have an adequate infrastructure within the trade union movement to quickly respond to those types of threats in the community sector.
So was that effective then?
It was effective in the sense that it was seen as, and is very much, a first step in relation to creating an identity for the community sector members and delivering their agenda in relation to service and such like. So it was to a degree, but not. It's not the final step in relation to the effectiveness.
Yeah. So what are the big issues then for those employed in the sector?
Well, the major issues for those employed in the sector are low pay, bad terms and conditions of employment, and one of the real key issues for those employed in the sector is security of employment, because the funding that's put in place for the sector by government is on a yearly basis, so there's no guarantee in relation to continuity of employment going forward, and so those would be the main issues for the sector.
Right, okay. And has there been a big uptake in membership since the forming of this branch?
Yeah, there has been a large increase in relation to the numbers of people taking up membership, and we find that very, very encouraging, because as an organisation we predominantly focus on one particular sector of the community sector, and we've had huge success in relation to increasing density within those particular sectors.
Yeah.
A sample would be people employed in jobs clubs. When we commenced our campaign in jobs clubs, we had a percentage density of about 18%. That would be about 18% of all people employed in jobs clubs were trade union members. And that's now as high as 92% in that particular sector. So it's been very effective.
That's quite an increase, all right. Yeah, that's great. We'll move on to yourself, Darragh. You're a lead organiser in the organising department.
Yep.
What is the organising department? What do you do?
The organising unit in SIPTU was set up about 5 years ago. And our role is to go out and to organise workers, to give them the tools that they're able to improve their terms and conditions and campaign for within their sector, and particularly the community sector is what I'm involved in. So practically that means is going out and talking to workers, having meetings, encouraging them to not only join up but also to become active within the union as well. That's really what the union is, and its essence is when workers come together and decide what their issues are and decide how they're going to be able to deliver that as well. So our role then is to try and develop activists, develop the leaders, and give them the kind of necessary skills. So we'd train people up, and we'd also kind of produce material and kind of newsletters and stuff like that to support the campaign as well.
And would they come to you, or would you go out to organisations?
Well, within the community campaign, and what we're trying to do is to focus on specific areas so that you're able to develop an effective structure. So at the moment within the community campaign, we'd focus on, just say, childcare or community employment, and that's for workers. It's the most effective way of building strength, not only in their own workplace, but within the sector that they're working in as a whole.
Right. And what are the links then between the two, between the organising branch and the community branch?
Well, we'd work quite closely together, where the organising unit might go out and bring new members in. The branch would traditionally work with existing membership and trying to deliver improvements as well. But I suppose the third element that's really important is having good, strong activists involved in it. But when you have those three, the organisers, the branch organisers and activists working together, you can develop some really effective campaigns.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting, and I guess it's a new branch as well, so it sounds like there's a lot of activity there. And
yeah, there's a great vibrancy about it,
yeah.
And definitely a lot of people are really getting involved and getting stuck into it as well. And I think it's maybe an element in the community sector that has been missing for a while, a way of kind of giving a focus to it and giving it a national voice, to be able to kind of speak on the bread and butter issues that trade unions talk about, pay and terms and conditions and so on. Yeah,
very good. Okay, thanks for that, Darragh.
McCarthy was simply a front in relation to the Department of Finance shopping list with regard to cuts. The Department of Finance wrote the literature in relation to the community sector with regard to cuts, not McCarthy. McCarthy simply fronted the report for the Department of Finance. And we need to understand that those right-wing people within that particular department need to be challenged in relation to their perspective of what is value for money in relation to funding.
We're going to talk about this campaign at the end of September the 30th, and what it's about and who it affects. Maybe, Darragh, if you could tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, we've been organising with the community sector for about 3 years. We've had quite a big campaign, and what's happened in the last few months is that McCarthy's On Board SNP report has come out, and essentially this is a fairly substantial attack against the community sector. We're seeing a lot of services and programmes are being lined up for substantial budget cuts, and this is a sector where it's very lean anyway. There's not much fat around there. So if everything is going to be implemented that's proposed to McCarthy, we're going to see widespread closures of programmes. We're going to see job losses. We're also going to see a lot of services that are delivered in communities, and generally in communities at disadvantage. They're going to simply disappear. And there's a lot of reasons why this is a bad thing, but even economically, for every euro that's spent on drug rehabilitation, which would be one of the areas, the state saves €3. For quality childcare, for every euro that's spent, the state saves at least €10. So while they think that they might actually be saving money by making these cuts, the long-term effects are going to be a lot worse, and it's going to end up costing the state a huge amount more money in the long term. Right.
Gerry, you're the branch organiser for the community branch, and I know it's relatively new, in fact the newest branch in SIPTU.
That's right. Yeah.
How big support base do you think there'll be, and as well for this campaign?
Well, it's hard to judge how big the support base will be, but what we'd say to people is that if we don't have an effective response to these threats to the sector, that the sector will effectively disappear, because the nature of the reductions and the funding reductions that's being proposed will lead to the elimination of the sector nearly in its entirety, and you will end up with a sector that has no funding in place to deliver the services, and those are services that are most critical to the most underprivileged, the most deprived within the community.
So they're, it's obviously crucial that they're
crucial.
maintained.
I mean, it's crucial that they're
bad
maintained.
economics,
And really for the sector and the purpose of the protest on the 30th of September is to ensure that the sector is visible in relation to its opposition to those particular cuts. Because for too long, the community sector has been seen as the invisible sector. And politicians, and particularly McCarthy, which in essence was a front for the Department of Finance in relation to proposed cuts, they need to realise that there will be a consequence to their decisions, and the community sector will deliver that consequence to them, and that's the real key issue for us on the 30th.
Right, and so what form will the protest take then?
Okay, well the form it will take is that people will assemble, people from the sector will assemble in Parnell Square, Garden of Remembrance, and we will march down to government buildings, and we will deliver a mandate to government to engage in relation to the proposed cuts to the community sector, and to reverse the cuts that have already been implemented, and to insist that the McCarthy report, the recommendations contained within the McCarthy report, are not implemented for the community sector. Because if they were to be implemented, it would effectively destroy the sector. It would lead to the reduction or the abolishment of services for those most needy in the community, and we simply cannot accept that.
Yeah. And how effective do you think it will be?
We hope it will be effective. We hope that government will change their position in relation to cuts for the community sector. And we hope that they will be convinced that what they're proposing is no savings, will lead to no savings, but will actually lead to higher costs for government and taxpayer by implication in relation to reducing those services that are critical to the community sector.
And I guess you're seeing this also as a sort of the start of something as opposed to an end product.
Very much, and I mean those employed in the community sector are determined that if the march is not effective and if government don't engage, that they will lobby and agitate at local level in relation to local politicians and demand that those local politicians deliver an agenda for the community sector which they're mandated to do by those people who voted for them in their local communities.
Well, we'll see. Darragh, how can people get involved? What should they do?
Well, for the build-up for the 30th, one of the most important things is that we get a good turnout on the day. So it's going around convincing not just your colleagues who you might work with, but the wider community and the people who use the services and people on boards of management. I know that we're talking to activists all around the country, and people are arranging buses to come along on the day. People are making placards and different kinds of props, and people have used kind of coffins as kind of symbolic of the death of community development on a recent protest as well. But kind of going forward from that, as Gerry was saying, that we need to bring this to the local politicians, that they have to they are responsible because they're the ones who are going to be voting on the budget to implement these cuts. So they need to know that their jobs on the line if they're going to sell out the community sector and their local communities as well.
Okay, well I wish you the best of luck with that on the 30th of September, and thanks very much for coming into studio to talk about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica.
Who were the people that were represented on board SNP or on board Guillotine? How many of them come from marginalised or excluded communities?
If we're gone in the morning, there will be no summer camps for our children. 70 children who we provide summer programmes for will be on the streets in the summer. If we're gone in the morning, there'll be no respite grants for vulnerable families. If we're gone in the morning, the services in the local community centres, meals for the elderly, other funding that we bring in for that community centre will be gone. If we're gone in the morning, adult education locally won't be there.
Isn't it actually great to be taken to the streets again?
everyone has been able to get into the room today, or get into the building today, so it's amazing, a huge depth of feeling about what's happening to the CDPs.
On the 30th of September 2009, thousands of workers in the community sector and activists are coming together on Parnell Square at 1 o'clock, marching up to the Dáil to protest against the savage cuts that are proposed by McCarthy. We're calling on everyone to join us on that day.